Let's talk about a word you hear all the time, especially when a big company gets into trouble. That word is independence. It's supposed to be the bedrock of good corporate governance, the thing that ensures people are held accountable. But what does it really, truly mean for someone to be independent? Well, we're about to break it all down.
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to nail down what independence actually is. Then, we'll get into why it's not just a simple yes or no question. After that, we'll zoom in on the board's main watchdog, tackle the classic debate over who to hire for that job, and finally, look at the rules designed to keep this whole thing safe.
All right, first things first. What are we even talking about when we say independence? At its heart, it's this absolute must-have for professional behavior, especially when the stakes are high, like in a boardroom, where one bad call can have huge ripple effects. Just think about that question for a moment. It really gets right to the core of the issue, doesn't it? If your job is to audit a company's finances, to be the tough critic, but you're also best friends with the CEO, could that friendship get in the way? Would you really be willing to call them out? This is exactly the kind of sticky situation that the idea of independence is meant to stop before it even starts. And that leads us straight to the textbook definition. Independence is all about avoiding influence from someone with a stake in the outcome. It's really about having the freedom, the clear runway, to do the right thing without anything holding you back, whether that's a friendship, or a financial incentive, or even just being intimidated by a big personality.
And here is the absolute key. It all comes down to who you're really working for. For people like auditors, or the non-executive directors we'll talk about in a bit, their main duty isn't to the management team they see every day. Nope. Their true legal obligation is to the owners of the company, the shareholders. Independence is the only thing that makes it possible to truly honor that duty.
But, in the real world, it's not so simple. Independence isn't like a light switch that's either on or off. It's much more of a spectrum, a scale of influence, and it's something that every professional has to navigate really, really carefully.
So you can think of it like this. On one extreme end, you've got total independence. No connection, no history, just completely impartial decisions. And on the other extreme, you have zero independence, where two people are so close that every single decision is biased. Of course, almost nobody lives at the extremes. Real life happens somewhere in that messy gray area in the middle.
And these are the 5 big threats that are always trying to pull someone toward the wrong end of that spectrum. A self-interest threat is pretty obvious, like if you want a ton of stock in a company you're supposed to be watching over. That familiarity threat, that's our auditor and a CEO friend. And an intimidation threat is exactly what it sounds like, when you feel bullied into signing off on something you know just isn't right.
Okay, let's make this less theoretical and look at a really important role, the non-executive director, or as you'll often hear, the NED. In a lot of ways, these are the people who are meant to be the living, breathing version of independence on a company's board.
So, in a nutshell, what is an NED? They're hired to sit on the board and basically be the eyes and ears of the shareholders. They don't have an office at the company, they're not involved in the day-to-day grind. Their job is to bring that outside, objective view, to challenge the leadership and make sure the company is being run for the long-term good of its owners.
And this brings us to this really interesting, ongoing debate that happens in boardrooms all the time. When you need a new NED, who do you hire? Do you get someone from inside your own industry? Or do you pick someone from a completely different world? It's a huge choice, and it's got some really clear pros and cons.
Just look at this breakdown here. On one hand, the industry insider, they bring incredible technical knowledge. They've got a built-in network, they can hit the ground running. But the risk? Well, they might have old loyalties, or just think about problems the same way as everyone else, which can hurt their independence. The outsider, though, they bring that fresh perspective, that genuine objectivity, but they might not have the industry-specific knowledge to really push back on a technical issue. You see the dilemma, right?
So what's the real solution? Well, it's not about picking one over the other. The best, most effective boards, they build a team. They aim for a strategic blend of talents. They'll have some NEDs with that deep industry expertise, and others who bring totally fresh eyes from different fields. It's that mix, that diversity of thought that makes a board really strong.
Okay, so if independence is so important, but also so fragile,
how do we actually protect it? Well, that brings us to the rules of the game, the official structures put in place to build a kind of firewall around this whole principle.
Corporate governance codes are just full of rules like these. For instance, a NED can't have been a recent employee. That's just common sense. They ban cross-directorships. That's where an exec from company A sits on company B's board, and vice versa. It prevents that whole you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours culture. They limit share options to keep NEDs focused on long-term health, not just a quick stock bump. They're also allowed to get outside legal advice on the company's dime, which is a huge deal. And finally, term limits. This makes sure a director doesn't get so comfortable and familiar over, say, 10 years that their independent edge just fades away.
But in the end, all these rules and regulations, they're crucial, but they're just a framework. Real independence is more than just ticking boxes on a checklist. It's a character trait. It's a commitment to integrity. And it's truly the foundation of the trust that everyone, shareholders, employees, all of us, places in a company.
And that leaves us with one last and pretty challenging thought. We can write rules to stop the obvious conflicts of interest, but ultimately, independence comes down to a person. It's about their judgment, their courage, their character. So the real question is, beyond the rulebook, how can we ever truly measure that? That's something for every one of us to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.